2021 was an okay but kind of subpar year for film. I mean, movies were actually back in the theaters. Kind of hard to be worse than last year in that respect, but not gonna lie, in terms of the average quality of films, it may be lower than 2020. I actually thought the year got off to a good start. I watched Barb and Star back in February. I thought that was great, and I thought the year was going to keep on building on that. Usually it takes me till June or July to see a film that I really like, but here it was all the way back in the winter. But 2021, even more than other years, was the same old story of waiting for films at the end of the year to impress me, only to be deeply disappointed by the crop of films provided. Last Night in Soho, Dune, The French Dispatch, Power of the Dog, the year's supposedly heavy hitters were deeply disappointing to me and ranged from just good at best to really, really terrible at worst. I probably have watched more movies this year than I ever had, not just in terms of 2021 movies that came out during a specific year, but movies in general, and yet I've never seen less films that I've truly loved. Movies have gotten so consistently disappointing that it quite frankly has made me question my interest in the medium itself, and that is really depressing. So that was my year in movies. Yup. But it's the end of the year, so here are the best. Number 5, Licorice Pizza. PTA's latest is a film that I believe is going to get better with age. It is most likely going to rise up on this list and establish itself as one of my favorite films of the first half of the 2020s. But it is also a film that I felt lacked a certain visceral quality on the first time around. It didn't quite wash over me the same way that others have described it as doing to them. But with that said, out of the 229 films I logged on Letterboxd this year, it is the 36th best, and so it obviously did a lot right. I think what Licorice Pizza does best is capture the sense of mournful nostalgia and undeniable warmth. The dreamy quality of the images, the way the film looks when Gary and Alana are strolling at sundown, it captures both this yearning and longing for youth and innocence, but also just an unbridled appreciation for it. As other people have echoed in their reviews of the film, I think Licorice Pizza is a film that is sadder than it initially seems. Like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood before it, it is a film that is deeply regretful that a certain time and spirit associated with the place has come and gone. The San Fernando Valley, which is exquisitely realized here in its production design, is obviously a place that PTA has a lot of affection for. It is a place that he recognizes is not the same anymore, but this physical location is not the main source of the film's nostalgia. I think more generally, it is about this excitement and happiness that comes with youth that dissipates over time, the excitement that we can feel about love and other things in our lives. It cannot be captured at a later age, and I think the film is generally saddened by that, but it is never overwhelmed by this sadness. It instead makes sure to exude happiness in almost every scene and lets that dominate the film overall. The script smartly allows Gary and Alana to run wild together, to allow the charm, happiness, and hilarity that comes from their interactions to dominate the film, to have that as its defining quality. But this is also not an overly optimistic or naive romance. In fact, these characters are more so focused on their own ideas of fulfillment, which allows them not only to be incredibly well rendered, independent of the romance, but also allows the film to comment on the selfishness and possessiveness that comes with the romance itself. There is a source of animosity brewing between these characters, and yet that animosity does not poison the relationship, as you still want them to fall for each other in the end. Cooper Hoffman and Alana Haim complement each other incredibly well here, and the film overall is a great balancing act that tries to highlight the ups and downs of both youth and love itself. Number 4, Shiva Baby. Yeah, so some people will consider this a last year release. As I talked about beforehand in my other end of the year list video, there are some sticky distribution problems, but the overwhelming majority of people would count it as this year, so I'm counting it as one of the best of this year, so here we go. Shiva Baby feels really of its time. It captures this late millennial, early Gen Z anxiety that can never be properly defined, but has certain core components. The stress of going into a competitive job market and trying to find a worthwhile and meaningful profession that is also respected by your social circle, and also a stress of wanting to be desirable and sexy. It's a generation, a certain time period, this late 90s, early 2000s, group of people. It's not just enough anymore to be simply smart or simply desirable by others, but to have it all, and that's essentially what Danielle wants in this situation where she is both trying to have a good career, but also wanting to be wanted by her sugar daddy. No matter if you find the sexual or family anxiety more compelling, on a first watch, you're more so just going to be in awe of how well said anxiety is conveyed by both the sound design and editing. Not since Uncut Gems have these two aspects been married so well together to convey a main character's world crashing in on them and putting the viewer in that same position. It is an incredibly stressful film, and it is one which I feel as though Emma Seligman, the director, truly understood that in order to make this not so much as just something that could have been adapted from the stage, not something like a chamber drama, but something uniquely cinematic, that she understood that these two elements had to be specifically idiosyncratic, and she absolutely succeeded in this regard in finding people that would help her achieve this goal. The film's script is likewise great. It's incredibly funny and has a decisively witty quality to it without having the characters talk in an elevated and unnatural way, which happens so many times when you have screenwriters trying to give a film a punchy, banter-esque quality to the dialogue. This is also a script that has a lot of tender moments as well. It comes in the form of the interactions with Danielle and her mother. Danielle's mother is my favorite character in the film, but Maya is a close second. But you have this whole rich ensemble which you can love in their own specific ways. They are all so funny and all have their own brand of passive aggressiveness, which is the main thing that holds Shiva Baby together. This idea of tension and uneasiness at this family gathering where everyone is trying to take digs at specific people in their own ways, and it makes for something that is incredibly sharp and telling of family interactions, no matter if it's at a Shiva or anywhere else. But of course, I have to talk about Danielle and Rachel Sennett's performance. Without the way Danielle is written and the way Rachel performs as her, you don't have a soul for this film. It doesn't have meaning or purpose. It's so easy to get lost in one of the fun side characters or incredible technical aspects. But without Danielle, without her own struggles, the film has no meaning. It has no purpose. And she is such a complex and pitiful and angering and despicable and lovely and awesome character all at the same time. And Shiva Baby as a whole, whether it be in 2020 or 2021, whatever you want to define it as, whatever year you want to place it in, it is still a premiere film and a premiere debut from someone who is sure to only grow in quality as they go on with film. So congrats Emma Seligman on this film, and Shiva Baby is one of the year's best. Number 3, Memoria. It's a film that I don't intend to talk about that long here because it's so transfixing and mesmerizing, yet for reasons that you can't describe in a review or anything else. Memoria is something you have to see to believe, to understand, to like or not like, because it's something that I feel as though that I shouldn't have liked because it is so contemplative and so slow, and yet it didn't feel slow at all in the theater. It's something that, sure, at home may completely not work at all, but I think Memoria, more than anything else this year, proved the power of the movie theater, of being isolated and just having the sole thing as your attention for 2 hours, and my God, did it work. Another reason why Memoria is so hard to talk about is that you don't know what to praise. I mean, Tilda Swinton is outstanding, as to be expected from her, and Elkin Diaz absolutely steals the show when he enters the film later on in what's to be one of the most grossly overlooked performances of the entire year. But it seems, though, that the main source of the film's strengths, everything just goes back to the director, who, if you look at his name, thank God he has agreed to be nicknamed Joe, because who can even fathom to pronounce that? But it all comes back to what he is looking to achieve. But what is he looking to achieve? What is Memoria even about? It seems as though it's an experimentation in sound design early on, as is suggested by the immaculate sound booth scene, but then it seems to be commenting on history and finally death, and as is suggested by the title, Memory. It has fantasy and sci-fi elements. Characters disappear without a trace, as if they never existed. There's a death and resurrection. There's a memory sharing scene straight out of Blade Runner 2049. It's so confusing and yet so whimsical because so rarely, in even the most challenging films nowadays, do you have virtually no interpretive base to work off of. And that's exactly what Memoria offers. Not an experience where you're floundering around looking for answers in a mystery puzzle box, but something where you don't need the answers, where you can allow the sights and sounds of the film to envelop you, to just experience it. And a lot of this success comes from the direction being so precise. It's not as if it's a Tarkovsky feature that's simply allowing the camera to roll for too long. No, it's very precise and allows you to experience beat for beat what's going on and the patience and being able to see the natural beauty of everything. But it also has a definite momentum to it. It's not just waiting around, making you see every single small detail that happens, but it's also not rushing through. It's wonderfully patient without being boring in the slightest, and it's just overall such a confusing, confounding, but utterly transfixing achievement from this year in film. Number two, House of Gucci. I really wish I could say that in an Italian accent right now, but my voice is far too hoarse with this sickness I have, and by God, it is not going to work, and I'm going to sound way too serious when talking about this film, and I wish I wouldn't, because House of Gucci is messy, it is funny, it is campy, and that's how it should be treated. I really think there was a critical misinterpretation with this film. I think that the audiences got it right way more than the critics. And yes, Ridley Scott's direction is way too obvious at points. The acting cues are filmed in a very sloppy format. And Jared Leto may be the only one who fully understood the true camp that came with this script and this story. But I think House of Gucci does a lot of stuff incredibly well. Indecisive as the film may be in its balance of comedy and drama, when it leans into either fully, it works so well. Jared Leto is hysterical throughout. The film has the funniest scene of the year in the sex scene between Lady Gaga and Adam Driver, and even the way that Lady Gaga makes the father-son House of Gucci symbol. It's a film that I felt as though recognizes its cartoonish edge and utilizes it to great effect, not to undermine the dramatic scenes, but to give the film its own flavor apart from being a stereotypical rise and fall Oscar bait drama. The drama was never undermined by the comedy, and I thought that the beats were actually the most engaging and investing of the year. Whether it be Patrizia and Maurizio talking with Paolo outside when he pulls up the car, or the way that Al Pacino screams when he finds out his son has given away all the shares, or the way Adam Driver throws the veal on the ground and is reminded of his roots and everything that he has worked so hard to build up. I was never more invested in the film and its dramatic turns, in its twists, in its developments than here with House of Gucci. Number one, Bo Burnham, Inside. Now, this is a film I take very little pride in being my number one because, well, I'm first off not a Bo Burnham stan. I'm not an obsessive over him and this feature, and a lot of people, even at the time of its release, when they didn't even have time to really mull it over, defended this with absolutely no consideration for its flaws, and I hate to be grouped in with that. And also, this is argued that it's not a film, although I think that's totally disingenuous, and to say it's a comedy special when it has virtually no resemblance to anything like a stand-up or anything similar to anything but a cinematic experience, that's an issue of itself. It's also not something that can be seen in the theater. It was a streaming exclusive on Netflix. But I cannot deny that Bo Burnham Inside is the most powerful film thing that I saw this year. I think Inside is going to stand the test of time as one of the best artistic achievements of 2021, not just because it captured how people felt at a specific time, but because it is an intensely comprehensive ideological reflection of one man. In the same way that Annie Hall was the best attempt I've ever seen at trying to capture all the nuances of people on the silver screen, well, I think Inside is a similar achievement of trying to capture all the nuances, the self-contradictions of an ideology on screen, of one person, all their political views, their social values, all their fears, their anxieties, their hopes and dreams, all conveyed under an hour and a half, told through incredibly funny and catchy songs. It's easy to get lost talking about just the sadness and dread of Inside, but I think we should be talking more about how freaking impressive that he's able to talk about sadness and dread through the format of a concert film, through a glorious rock opera that changes musical genre from minute to minute, that doesn't have the same repetitive sound that comes with listening to the same band, but instead has radically different music throughout that never gets you bored, that is also genuinely well-written music in and of itself, that you are able to listen to such tracks outside of the film, and that they're incredibly catchy, but also from line to line, not only filled with poignancy, but genuine comedy. Not only is Bo Burnham Inside the funniest film of the year, it's one of the most consistently funny things to be released in the past couple of years. It doesn't sacrifice its status as a comedy special, because it certainly is. It has Bo Burnham's unique brand of comedy elevated to the next level, not just by a sense of urgency, but just by pure musical genius. Inside is an emotional overload, but I can't stress enough the importance of talking about how good it is as a film, even in its visuals. I think that it is a testament to Burnham's creativity that I found it to be the most visually striking film of the entire year, and even the most experienced cinematographers didn't quite apply the mantra of every frame of painting as well as he did, because I think that so many of the images have burned so deeply into my brain now, and I think it is leagues above everything else I saw this year and has virtually no dead weight in terms of its visuals or even in its story itself. It is pound for pound the best film of the year by leaps and bounds. It has no dead weight on it, no fat. It has pure narrative muscle. Every scene, every song serves a purpose. There's no discernible weak spot here, not a song that you want to skip over. And even that small thing is a feat considering how many concert films are utterly capsized by a weak link or two among the stretch. And I would be lying even if I like to critically analyze it that I wasn't touched by a lot of things that Bo Burnham had to say of making art something that lasts, the artistic hell that comes with the creative process, the oddness of going back and re-engaging with the world. There's, of course, in the idea porn that is Bo Burnham inside, a lot to still love. And even though some of it rings with pretentiousness and a lot of it is why I can't quite have it at a 5-star, because I don't think it's perfect. I do think he is, in some regards, throwing every single idea at the wall to stick. But so many of those ideas do stick, so many of them resonate with an audience that, of course, sees a lot of themselves in him. Well, that's just why it has to be my best film of the year. And that is it. That is my top 5 films of the year. Thank you so much for watching, and see you all in 2022.